The Woman Who Rode Away, Part 1. She had thought that this marriage of all marriages would be an adventure. Not that the man himself was exactly magical to her. A little wiry, twisted fellow, 20 years older than herself, with brown eyes and greying hair, who had come to America, a scrap of a wastrel from Holland, years ago, as a tiny boy, and from the gold mines of the West had been kicked south into Mexico, and now was more or less rich, owning silver mines in the wilds of the Sierra Madre. It was obvious that the adventure lay in his circumstances, rather than his person. But he was still a little dynamo of energy, in spite of accidents survived, and what he had accomplished alone. One of those human oddments there's no accounting for. When she actually saw what he had accomplished, her heart quailed. Great green-covered unbroken mountain hills, and in the midst of the lifeless isolation, the sharp pinkish mounds of the dried mud from the silver works. Under the nakedness of the works, the walled-in one-story adobe house, with its garden inside, and its deep inner veranda with tropical climbers on the sides. And when you looked up from this shut-in flowered patio, you saw the huge pink cone of the silver mud refuse, and the machinery of the extracting plant against heaven above. No more. To be sure, the great wooden doors were often open, and then she could stand outside in the vast open world, and see great void, tree-clad hills, piling behind one another from nowhere into nowhere. They were green in autumn time, for the rest pinkish, stark, dry, and abstract. And in his battered Ford car, her husband would take her into the dead, thrice-dead little Spanish town forgotten among the mountains. The great sun-dried dead church, the dead portals, the hopeless covered marketplace where the first time she went she saw a dead dog lying between the meat stalls and the vegetable array, stretched out as if forever, nobody troubling to throw it away. Deadness within deadness. Everybody feebly talking silver, and showing bits of ore. But silver was at a standstill. The Great War came and went. Silver was a dead market. Her husband's mines were closed down, but she and he lived on in the adobe house under the works, among the flowers that were never very flowery to her. She had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and her eldest, the boy, was nearly 10 years old before she aroused from her stupor of subjected amazement. She was now 33, a large, blue-eyed, dazed woman, beginning to grow stout. Her little, wiry, tough, twisted, brown-eyed husband was 53, a man as tough as a wire, tenacious as wire, still full of energy but dimmed by the lapse of silver from the market, and by some curious inaccessibility on his wife's part. He was a man of principles, and a good husband. In a way he doted on her. He never quite got over his dazzled admiration of her, but essentially he was still a bachelor. He had been thrown out on the world, a little bachelor, at the age of 10. When he married, he was over 40, and had enough money to marry on, but his capital was all a bachelor's. He was boss of his own works, and marriage was the last and most intimate bit of his own works,